This is interesting. Traditionalist SSPX group distances itself from Vigano archbishop accused of schism. First of all, did you have any thoughts on Dear Vigano and what's taken place recently that you wanted to share?
Well, yeah. You know what? I was thinking about this, in that I think when we mention schism, oftentimes the first thing that comes to mind is something doctrinal.
Right.
That you have some sort of intellectual disagreement with what's going on, right?
Yeah.
But that's not fundamentally what schism is.
Right. That might be heresy.
Yeah, absolutely. Schism is fundamentally a break of charity.
Can I read the definition from the Catechism for us?
Yeah.
So heresy, just to be clear, is the obstinate post-baptismal denial of some truth which must be believed with divine and Catholic faith. Or it is likewise an obstinate doubt concerning the same. Talks about apostasy. What is schism, though? Schism, or schism, or schism, depending on whose side you're on. Schism, I'm going to say.
Or Snickers.
You're not you when you're hungry.
Which is incorrect. Schism is the refusal of submission to the Roman pontiff or of communion with the members of the church subject to him.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that if you refuse to acknowledge who the Roman pontiff is, then you clearly are refusing submission.
No doubt.
To that person.
Yeah, doubtless. Yeah. But the communion is an important one, because when you're talking about friendship, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, St. Thomas says that friendship and charity are altogether the same thing, right? You know, they're two different words to describe the same phenomenon. Okay. And they're characterized by, again, two elements, right? Desiring the good of another and then wishing unity with them. So that's when we talk about communion.
Yeah.
That's when we get to enjoy that friendship.
I love that. It's not just enough to want what's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
I have to also want union with you.
That's right.
With you.
Yeah, okay. That's right. And of course you can want something that's good for someone without really wanting, it's like, all the best, man, without doing something. Or you could desire union without wishing they're good. And that's like fornication or something of that sort, right? Well, in this case, I mean, what's being brought up, it's disobedience. So it's not a love of the Father. And it's also a desire to cleave the true participation in one another's life, which is a marker of love itself, right? So it's really devastating. I also think, I don't know, I'm going to want to get your take on this, that disagreements with the Holy Father, even with a friend, could be had in a couple different ways. Like in one sense, it could be the occasion of a true estrangement, you know? But there's another way that you can have a disagreement where it's with the presumption of fidelity too, you know? And I think that's great. I mean, I think it's the only way to have a disagreement with somebody, where I can say something like, you know, I really don't like the fact that you still haven't shaved your head, Matt, you know? and we can have some sort of like disagreement, but it's in the presumption that the friendship is stronger. And some people even, you know, they lean into that. And it's like, you can even call, you know, how many times has somebody called you a son of a bitch in a great way, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a horrible thing to say to somebody in one regard, but it's like, oh, Matt, that son of a bitch, you know?
Yeah.
Sounds a lot, you know, people say that a lot in Toronto, Ohio, but and it's a compliment, right? In that context, is where you're actually leaning in to just how strong the unity is with that person.
I want to give a shout.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's good. I want to give a shout out, and I don't mind giving shout outs when I'm about to compliment somebody, to a fellow called Brandon Vaught, who works for Word on Fire.
Oh yeah, I know Brandon.
Yeah, so I said some things on my show a couple of years back that he strenuously disagreed with. And to his credit, wrote to me directly, had it out with me like a man, told me I was wrong for all these reasons. Because I love and respect him, I took his concerns to people I respected who I knew would be objective. And after some time thinking about it, I was very willing to admit I was wrong, actually. You know, sometimes you can tell when you're not willing.
Yeah. I remember you going through this, actually. Yeah.
Well, I decided I'm pretty sure I'm not wrong here.
Yeah.
I told him that. He was disappointed, but he even said, well, I trust that our friendship is stronger than this, and I look forward to meeting up with you. And I was just, wow. What a man. Like, not only is he manly enough to directly call me out on something that he thinks I've done wrong, but then when I disagree with him, he's like, okay, I'll leave it. I love you. And yeah. Is that
That
something
is so
like
cool.
you're talking
That's
about?
exactly what I'm thinking of. Yeah. And I think we feel it a lot with our dads too. Like we know when we're in an occasion where we're actually hating our father, versus just disagreeing with dad, right? And that's gets onto the second side of this definition of schism, that disobedience.
What would be an example, do you think, practically speaking, of refusal to have communion with those who are in subject to him? So that was, let me read that properly. So it's refusal of submission to the Roman pontiff, or so refusal of communion with the members of the church. Subject. What does that look like practically, to refuse communion with those who are subject? I mean, I suppose we would say it would be like the Eastern Orthodox, perhaps.
Sure.
Who refuse to have us commune with them because they believe we're in schism and we believe they're in schism.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect kind of social example of it, to try and get into our own lives, because obviously we can have occasions of schism in our own hearts and in our own lives, right? And I think that you might find occasions of, I really just don't want to talk to anybody after Mass, sort of thing. I mean, sometimes you're just like tired or whatever else, and you just got to go, right? I mean, no putting fingers. But if it's like continually and just you're treating the parish like it's a sacrament factory without developing the relationships of genuine communion where you become somehow necessary in their lives.
I would think that would be schism, like in an analogous way, not per se.
You can talk about degrees of these things, just like you can talk about degrees of virtues and vices, right? Okay. But I think you might actually be tending
But even when we talk about, sorry to cut you off, but even when we talk about, say, like slandering your brother comes under the commandment, thou shalt not murder. And someone might say, well, in a sense, it's a degree of murder. So no, it's a very, very different thing. And I would think something similar here is with schism. Like you might say it's schism by analogy, but I would think it's something more like, I refuse to go to the Novus Ordo. I refuse to be in communion with the Novus Ordo Church or something like that.
Well, I think that's an obvious example too.
Do you think that's what I'm asking? Do you think that might be an example of refusal of? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you might be able to say something like, I don't want my kids to be exposed to it or something like that. And there you're actually taking something that might be a genuine concern. Yeah. But I think what's more fundamental is that you are placing a noble desire in such a way that it begins to break down something good.
Okay.
And when you've taken something that is genuinely noble and in fact good, and you've made it disproportionately important,
I see.
Then to the point where you've started to refuse a different good, then they're no longer harmonious with one another. They're not symphonic. They don't operate together. And the common good is supposed to be perfectly ordered, where the goods are flourishing in relationship to one another. So I would agree with that. I think I would still hold to the example, and it's just kind of a question because it's not an objective thing. I'm trying to bring out something that's not objectively schismatic, right? For this example. So I don't think like leaving quickly after Mass is objectively schismatic. I'm trying to say like, where can we all be thinking about our lives? It's like, why am I leaving?
Yeah.
Because I really don't want to hang out with these people. Do I want to be necessary with these people? So I'm trying to find a really, really basic example of this. But I don't think it's just by analogy. I think that might be something for us to consider.
I have to think more about that because it seems to me that if you could have like a spectrum of schism in refusing communion with those who are subject to the Holy Father, it seems like you would have to do the same thing in regards to submission to the Holy Father, but I'm not sure there's a spectrum there. Well, I guess there is.
If it was analogy, so like the example that you gave of slandering versus murdering, right? You would certainly say that that's a good analogy insofar as you're trying to break down their person. Yeah,
kill their reputation. Yeah.
But then you have to consider like what I think it's Fourth Lateran Council said in defining analogy is that there's always a greater dissimilarity than there is similarity.
Right.
And so it's just like taking a step back and you look at somebody talking bad about someone versus somebody putting a knife through someone else's throat. So like, I think there's probably more difference there than there is similarity, right?
I'd much rather you slander me.
Yeah, exactly. and with schism, I think that's why I would say that it's actually starting to be on a spectrum of how much, if I wish someone else is good, how much am I also seeking unity with them?
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
it's, that's where
To put it positively.
Yeah. So maybe something for us to consider.
Yeah,
but
so it's not
I
enough.
Could be wrong, obviously.
So what you're saying, and then we'll get to the article. It's not enough to merely not be in subjection. The question ought to be like, how do I be in subjection?
Yeah.
The right way.
Yeah, that's really
Something
well
like
put.
that?
Yeah, it's super well put. I think this is like an Eastern thing, and not to like, you know.
No, do it.
I mean,
Go
we
Eastern.
don't have any Romans in the room right now, so we can say whatever we want. But I just love how everything's like, get out. how maximalist, you know, everything is. Like, you know, kind of the fast as much as possible. He's like, there's not like the same, you have to go to mass every Sunday. It's like, try and go as much as to every liturgy you can through the week.
Here's what the monks do. See how close you can get to it.
Bingo. Yeah. I just love it. Even the point of communion with infants. Yeah. Right? You know, like what are I mean, historically speaking.
Yep.
It was just that bishops couldn't get around to every parish at a certain point in the Middle Ages. And so then they stopped giving communion to infants, and they had to then start thinking, how do we justify not doing that? And obviously the justification was, well, these things, what do? They sanctify the intellect and the will, and those things aren't really developed in a baby yet, right? So that was the argument. I think it's, you know, very super clever, right? And obviously sound. But the Easterns will be like, yeah, but it's not like they don't have any intellect and will. Let's give it to them, man. It's like that maximalist, you know, tendency.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at this, because whatever you say about the SSPX, good for them.
SPX.
The SPX for coming out and sort of not allowing Vigano to sort of associate or make himself like Lefebvre. Okay. So in their statement, the SSPX, currently led by Father David Pagliarani, forgive me.
Killing it.
I know, this whole time, notes that in the decree summoning Vigano, the crime of schism is put forward because of certain public affirmations negating the elements necessary to maintain communion with the Catholic Church. The SSPX notes that Vigano, in his response to the accusation, defends himself in various ways, and he, asserting his case, compares to that of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, also summoned in his time to the palace. So I love that he's like, I'm kind of like Lefebvre, and like, well, are you? Because so here's what they say. Let's see. Oh, how this is written is really beautiful. I think like the way Vigano writes. I want there to be stirring music. I want to be on his team, but I can't. His defense is mine. His words are mine, and his arguments are mine. Here he's talking of Lefebvre.
Yeah.
So here's what the SSPX said regarding that. The SSPX, in their statement, said there is one point which significantly differentiates Vigano from Lefebvre, and this difference is that Archbishop Vigano makes a clear declaration of sedevacantism in his text. In other words, according to him, Pope Francis is not the Pope. Your thoughts? Or is that it? Have you shared your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I guess my only thought is that while it is a huge difference, I totally grant it, I do think about what is when John Paul II, when Pope St. John Paul II was excommunicating SSPX, his argument was, fine, you call me Pope, but what does that mean to you? You know, there's not that obedience there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had a friend, historian, atheist, that totally believed that Francis was a successor of Peter, like historically.
I see.
He's like, yeah,
I see.
Seems like the line tracks totally. But what is that to me? You know, and that's kind of a question for the SSPX, right? Is like, are you like that atheist historian friend of mine, right? Where you say, what is that to me? And that was what John Paul II was saying, you know, to them, is that it's not just that you think of me as a pope, as a successor of Peter, but that you think of me as father and are obedient to me, right? And so again, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about how I'll put that on some sort of I do think that is some actually on a spectrum there too of certain degrees. But there's no doubt about it that Vigano would say it would make some sort of juridical claim that the SSPX obviously had never have.
Yeah. So, and whenever I can get the SSPX to sort of pull away from this tendency among traditionalists, I think this is healthy.
Yeah.
because it's nice. I'm sure there are people who have a lot of criticisms of the Pope. Here's what I think happens. I think we feel maddened sometimes by the decisions of certain prelates and leaders in the church. And when it doesn't feel like the confusion that they're creating, according to us, is being treated with sufficient seriousness, we kind of lose our mind. We're like, are you kidding? And then when we get so enraged, it's like we need someone to say the strongest possible thing against that person to have our suspicions validated. I don't know if that makes sense.
Totally. Or you feel a great void of hearing it for so long, so you need to almost like backfill it. You need to do it with the,
that's right. I was recently with someone in Florida, and he found out I was Catholic, and he said to me, "What do you think of Pope Francis?" And I said, "Well," and I said what I said, and he said, "I'm a Catholic. I hate him." That's actually what he said to me.
Oh, wow.
I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating. He said the words, "I hate him." Well, I mean, you actually can't do that as a Christian, right? Like, the truth is not in you if you say you hate your brother.
Right. Yeah.
And what about your father?
Yeah.
But I do think sometimes when we feel like we're not being heard, maybe it's like a child who doesn't feel like it's being heard and eventually just loses it. And it's not like they don't have any point to be made. It might be that they're not, I don't know. I tend to think that the church is being attacked by both a modernist spirit and a sedevacantist spirit. And
which is a modernist spirit, ultimately, right?
I want to tell you about a course that I have created for men to overcome pornography. It is called strive21.com/Matt. You go there right now, or if you text STRIVE to 66866, we'll send you the link. It's 100% free, and it's a course I've created to help men, to give them the tools to overcome pornography. Usually men know that porn is wrong. They don't need me or you to convince them that it's wrong. What they need is a battle plan to get out. And so I've distilled all that I've learned over the last 15 or so years as I've been talking and writing on this topic into this one course. Think of it as if you and I could have a coffee over the next 21 days and I would kind of guide you along this journey. That's basically what this is. It's incredibly well produced. We had a whole camera crew come and film this. And I think it'll be a real help to you. And it's also not an isolated course that you go through on your own, because literally tens of thousands of men have now gone through this course. And as you go through the different videos, there's comments from men all around the world encouraging each other, offering to be each other's accountability partners and things like that. Strive21, that's strive21.com/Matt, or as I say, text STRIVE to 66866 to get started today. You won't regret it.